speculation. It's objectively true. Is there an alternative to it? The finale of our series, Is College Worth It?, is next. Over the past month, we have laid out many of the ways that college is failing American students and their parents and the government and our society more broadly. Every year it costs far more to go to college than it did in the previous generation. Those costs are rising far faster than inflation. Most students need tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans to go to college. And yet what they learn there is not impressive. The classes themselves are teaching less than ever, unless it's extremist political ideology. But even if college is failing, most students feel they have no choice but to go. There just aren't options. Some people are working assiduously to change that. Isaac Morehouse is the founder and CEO of Praxis. It's a startup that promotes apprenticeships as alternatives to college degrees, and he joins us now. Isaac, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
This is a tough pitch. We spent the last month working on this and talking to a lot of people who go to college and looking at it from all angles. And one thing you hear from almost everyone who's in college or planning to go is that I know it's too expensive, and I know I'm not going to learn much, and there are other downsides, but I don't have a choice. So how do you make the pitch to sort of high aptitude, middle class kids who could go to a four-year college? What do you tell them to convince them not to?
Yeah, and those are exactly the type of people that we work with. Look, the good news is the degree is dead. I'm not overstating that. It is a myth that you need a degree to start a career. Now, unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, or heaven forbid, a bureaucrat or a professor, you don't need a degree. And the best and brightest are realizing this, and they're getting started in their career now. And if you're sitting in the classroom, you're not giving yourself, you're going to get left behind, frankly.
Yes.
So, you know, we can point to the hundreds of people that we've worked with, and we've placed them in apprenticeships, and they've gone on to get great jobs. Many of those jobs, by the way, if you just look at a job posting, they will say degree required. But it's actually not true. Employers just want to know that you're going to create value for them. And there are so many ways that you can prove that better than just that dead piece of paper.
One of the things employers want is an assurance that someone has vetted you and that you're smart and that you kind of have your act together, that you have high aptitude but also the capacity for achievement. Without a degree, how do you convince them of that?
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that. A friend of mine who is a CEO, I just saw a tweet of his recently. He did a little poll, and he said, this is not scientific, but this is very much in line with the hundreds of CEOs and hiring managers I've talked with. He said, would you, if you only knew this about someone, who would you rather hire? Someone who would run a marathon or someone with a degree? 85% said the person who had run a marathon. That's just one example, but that's one of those things that, you know, it signals a lot of things at once. So look, you can go out and create projects and say, hey, I built this, I did this. You can start offering to do some projects, do some work for free. You can go and build up kind of a portfolio that showcases some of your skills and interests. Figure out what you're interested in, build some actual skills, and start working on things. And if you just think about for a minute, zoom out, if you were to enroll in college in the fall, 3 years from now, you'd still be in the classroom. If you were to go and this fall and do something like Praxis or something where you're going out, you're getting some work experience, you're building a body of work, in 3 years, you're going to have 3 years of professional experience under your belt. You're going to have so much more to leverage into a great job, a great career.
That's absolutely right. And there's a huge lobby of people whose job it is to lie to you and convince you otherwise, but it is a lie. So in the minute we have left, give us the pitch for Praxis. I'm an 18-year-old. I have decent grades, fine scores. I could get into a solid four-year college. Instead, I go to Praxis, and what happens then?
Yeah, so we're all about launching careers. And if you don't want that, if you want a debt-fueled drinking party that your parents will be proud of, go to college, by all means. Yeah. If you want to launch your career, you're going to need more than that. You're going to have to quit playing around and get out and do some real work. And we have a boot camp, a professional boot camp, where we put you through just really identifying your skills and doing real projects and things, as I mentioned, to kind of signal, to prove, hey, I built this, I can do this. And then we place you with startups where you're doing a paid 6-month apprenticeship on site, and you're learning from entrepreneurs, and you walk away at the end of the program. Almost all of our grads, 96% of them, get a full-time job at the end. So, I mean, that's what we do at Praxis, and I think it's just the beginning of this revolution.
Man, I want to force my kids to do that. Isaac, thank you. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
And truly,
likewise.
I hope that you and others offer an alternative to a system that is broken and collapsing, in my view. So,
absolutely.
Good job. Well, up next, a high schooler was shamed on Twitter by thousands of angry liberals for daring to wear a Chinese dress to the prom. The problem, she wasn't Chinese, and it's not allowed, according to them. What is going on? Liberal Sherpa Kathy Aru will lead us through the maze of cultural appropriation. Next. A high school senior in Utah was the subject to public shaming, a lot of it from across the country, because of the dress that she wore to prom. Watch.
A single post with a one-word caption and 4 photos changed everything.
I was accused of racism, cultural appropriation. I didn't mean any harm or racist intent.
That's Keziah Dom, and the dress she wore is called a chai pao. It is commonly worn in China. In response to the photos, Twitter user Jeremy Lamb tweeted this, quote, "My culture is not your bleeping prom dress," whatever that means, but his tweet received almost 180,000 likes. Ironically, the chai pao isn't actually from China originally. It was appropriated from a neighboring non-Chinese culture, but whatever, details don't matter in 2018. Kathy Aru is founding publisher of Catalina Magazine, and she is, of course, our liberal Sherpa, guiding us through the labyrinth of this modern world. So, Kathy, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming on.
Hi.
This raises, look, I get it. She unintentionally, but still appropriated a cultural talisman from a culture that's not hers. But does this go both ways? Does this mean that, Chinese people are wearing neckties, which is a Western invention? Are they committing cultural appropriation by doing that?
Well, what she did is almost like an exploitation of a culture. She's exploiting it. It's appropriation because she is taking advantage of a culture she doesn't really know much about. I don't think a businessman, a Chinese businessman, doesn't understand the Western culture. He understands what the tie is. He understands what the suit is. But she had no idea what this dress meant and what it's about, and she didn't even appreciate it. One of her comments was, "It's just a effing dress." I mean, this is a culture. She borrowed a culture, and she cared so little to appreciate it. So definitely wrong.
So if she had loved the dress more, would it have been better?
She loved the dress. She knew so little about the background. She said she loved it because it would give her attention. She loved the attention it would give her. And then she took those pictures in these poses that were, I think she thought were Asian poses, but they were actually Vape Nation and promoting some YouTuber that is controversial in itself. And she's praying to Papa John's Pizza. That's what that pose is. So that wasn't a pose that is appreciating a culture. That's a pose mocking a culture and promoting a YouTuber.
The Papa John's culture?
It's a YouTube. Well, no, she's taking.
But what about? This is not the only form of cultural appropriation from China. People use chopsticks. They eat Chinese food. College students have Chinese characters whose meaning they don't know tattooed on their bodies. Are all of those out of bounds now too? Well,
they say appropriation and appreciation is a fine line, and it seems like
noticed.
Apparently she didn't understand that she maybe is not a racist, but what she did was a form of racism.
So what you're saying is that white people ought to stick just to white culture and celebrate white culture?
No, what I'm saying.
Oh, you're not saying that. So what are you saying? I'm getting confused, because I thought you were saying that white people should stay in their lane and just stick with white culture and celebrate their own culture, right? Is that what you're saying?
She clearly used this for personal gain. She wanted the attention. She was in the middle of all those photos. She wanted it for personal gain. She put it on Twitter, on Facebook. It was for attention. It wasn't like eating Chinese food and enjoying the deliciousness of Chinese food.
People actually wear dresses for attention. That's sort of what they are. So I wonder, though, what about people from other cultures, from Asian cultures, who dye their hair blonde but don't fully understand the culture of blondness? Is that cultural appropriation?
I think they understand and they're appreciating it. It's not a majority culture taking advantage of a minority culture. It's not someone's dipping into a culture and stealing an element for personal gain.
White Americans are a tiny percentage of global culture, of course. They did invent the airplanes.
This happened in Utah. So
of course it did, but this is a global phenomenon. So let me ask you,
is there any majority culture? She did it here. To mock people from elsewhere.
I don't know if she was mocking. So this does raise an interesting question, though, about assimilation. So assimilation, which we've thought for hundreds of years was a good thing, is the process of cultural appropriation. I come in, and I take parts of your culture and make them my own. I adopt your culture.
Well,
we thought that was good, but now the idea is that everyone stays in their own culture, and then, of course, by definition, hates every other culture. But
there's assimilation and there's appropriation, and she didn't do this to assimilate, to get to know a culture. She did it to just enjoy it for an evening, get as much fame and publicity out of it as she could on Twitter and Facebook and social media, and just step right out. So how convenient.
But let me ask you this: when
How
someone
convenient.
from Dubai flies on an airplane, which was, of course, invented by the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk,
Right.
why isn't that an even more effect? And just gets on the plane and has a glass of champagne and doesn't think about the contribution of these Ohio brothers to flight. That's not cultural appropriation?
They are, but I don't think that they're getting anything. They're not hurting anyone, and they're not offending anyone by doing so. And when when she put on that dress, she hurt and offended others, and that's what happened.
She really hurt them. Maybe she
did.
should go to prison. We're going to discuss that next week. Kathy Ruth, thank you.
Bye.
We'll digest all of that and come back with a verdict. Holy smokes, what a fun hour that was. Hope you enjoyed it. We did. Every night, 8 p.m., the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink will be back tomorrow and the next night and forevermore. But now, Sean Hannity from New York City.